Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Today is November 10th. It's 11:30, and we'll go ahead and start our Executive Committee MPO meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is vote on the approval of the agenda. Any questions or comments?
Move approval.
Is there a second? Because I have no one in the room with me. Okay.
Second, Gare.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 3 is vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from the October 13th meeting. Is there any questions or comments about that?
Moved, Gare.
Okay.
Second.
Who seconded it?
Gary.
Gary.
Thanks, Gary. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent vote on contract and expenses. Todd, you're going to give us a brief description of the one that we got there.
Yeah, it's just our fees for Scott's services and some of the other staff there at Denton's Davis Brown for work on Economic Development District as well as the Water Trails Build Grant. Happy to answer questions, recommend approval.
Questions for Todd, for staff?
Moved, Gare.
Second, Reba.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 5 is report and vote on the calendar year 2022 meeting dates. Todd, did you want to talk a little bit about that? It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, there's not a lot to explain here, just our normal meeting dates, taking into account what we think are, holiday days as well as, the potential partnership trip. So pretty normal schedule. Recommend approval.
Move approval, Weaver.
Is there a second?
Second, Reba.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 6 is report and vote on the DART safety performance target fiscal year 2022.
No.
Todd, I got 2 different.
Should
I got
be,
2 different agendas. Yeah.
One is the draft MPO policy agenda, I believe.
All right. Well, let's disregard that. And item number 6 is report and vote on office lease renewal.
thanks. Sorry for the confusion there.
It's okay.
Our lease is up at the end of this year at the space. We shared last month, we looked around at other office space. There wasn't a whole lot of savings cost to move to another place, especially when you include the cost of moving and all that. So we developed a new lease with NAP. It's a 5-year lease with an option for 2 additional years. You can see the rates on the screen there. Includes some upgrades to the flooring, lighting, countertops. The lighting's already been done actually, and they've done some painting in the hall. Has the option, if the EDD takes off and we need more space for the MIPA group, we can help them secure that at the end of the hall there. Also includes some additional parking in the basement of the office building. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I would recommend approval.
Thanks, Todd. Any questions for Todd? You guys are awful quiet, and I need motions. If I'm going to sit in this room by myself, you got to say something, guys.
Sorry, I'll move approval.
Second, Reba.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion passes. Item number 7 is report and vote on the DART safety performance targets for fiscal year 2022 from Z. Is going to give us an update.
Yep, thanks. I'll be introducing this and then I'll be passing it over to Pat Daly, the safety manager. So last month we brought you the DOT safety performance targets. So DOT updated their safety targets but did not change the safety plan. The MPO will be incorporating these targets into the planning documents if they are approved. So I'm going to pass it along to Pat Daly, the safety manager at DOT, to give us a bit more information on these safety targets. So Pat, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Z, and good morning. Thank you for having me here. Next slide. So as you may remember, DART is required under the Federal Public Transportation Safety Agency Plan. Required to set and track 7 performance targets for each mode of service that we deliver. Prior to the plan, we had tracked these numbers, but not necessarily in this way. One other number that we had as a goal for FY21 was that we wanted our rate of preventable accidents to be at 1 or less preventable accident per 100,000 miles. We actually achieved a rate of 0.69 preventable accidents per 100,000 miles of revenue service. And we met or exceeded every one of our performance safety performance targets for that fiscal year. Yes. So we took a look at the targets. We set new targets, presented them to the DART Commission at our August meeting. They were approved. The way we took the tact we took at adjusting our performance targets was to, most cases, they were adjusted lower than the 21 targets, still considering the uniqueness of 21 service and some other factors. It's going to take us a couple of years really to dial in on some of these to see, especially if it's at the 100,000 mile, how that affects injuries, what those numbers look like, to get a good count going on and some good targets in the future. Next. So here's the result of our 2021. You can see on fixed route, we met or exceeded every target. And then we adjusted 22's targets a little bit lower to try to, again, dial in on what those numbers should be. One thing about our system reliability, which is major road calls, miles between major road calls. And a major road call, it's a good place to point out here, is that a mechanical breakdown that prevents that bus from completing its run. So a fixed route bus somewhere in the middle of a run gets broken down. We have to put a new bus out to it, transfer passengers. That would be a major road call. If we would get back down to DCS and there's no interruption service, there would be no road call. So you can see for paratransit, they had no road calls. We may have had some buses that had mechanical problems, but they were able to complete their trip. There was no delay in their trip by the time we got them another bus. One other thing, prior to 21, paratransit and fixed route were combined in our measuring of system reliability. We broke them out last year with what we thought was going to be a good number. Turns out we were way off. We ran a test this year or last year of putting in one accident, coding it as a paratransit. Turns out it was more than 400,000 miles between major road calls on paratransit. So we set the goal at 400,000 miles between calls for this coming year. Next page. And you can see rideshare and our taxi services had no incidents whatsoever. Are there any questions?
Any questions? None at this time. Is that the end of the presentation?
That's it, short and sweet.
Great. This is a voting item, so I would entertain a motion for item number 7.
Moved, Gare.
Second,
Second,
Weaver.
Anderweg.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 8 is report and vote on the Iowa DOT 2018 to 2022 Highway Safety Improvement Program targets. And I believe Z is going to give us an update on that.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, last month we brought you this item of the Iowa DOT's updated 2018 to 2022 safety targets. In the past, the MPO has been developing its own safety targets for the region, but based on feedback, we're now considering the adoption of the Iowa DOT statewide targets. These are available on the table to your right, but we'll still continue to report regional safety performance. Next slide, please. So as of November 2nd, statewide fatalities, serious injuries, and non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries are still below last year. But in the MPO area, we are seeing more serious injuries and more non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries compared to last year. So with that, staff recommends approval of the Iowa DOT safety targets. And if you have any questions, I can take them at this time.
Z, thank you. Any questions for Z?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 9 is report vote on the ICLEI regional affiliate membership for MPO. Allison?
That's me. Thank you. So last month we brought this idea to you, just a recap of it. It's a large global network of local governments that are looking towards sustainability and dealing with those things. And so there's an option for the MPO to become a regional member. That would include things like frameworks for policy and action, as well as tools, which would be one of the biggest pieces of this, including their ClearPath tool. And then once we work through those, technical assistance for our member communities, and then networking across the region and across the states, looking at similar initiatives. Des Moines and UNI CEEE, which is the Center for Energy and Environmental Education, both are members. This would not affect Des Moines' status as a member. And just to go over the fees again, so individual community fees you can see there, ranging from $1,200 to $2,250, whereas a regional affiliate membership would be $3,400, and that's based off our operating budget. As we roll into this, if other member communities of the MPO want to join, that would be up to them if they choose. It would not affect our membership. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you kind of an idea. On the left there, you can see the main graphic from the Des Moines greenhouse gas inventory from 2017. You see that pretty simple pie chart, and you see there that transportation is 26% of greenhouse gas emissions across the city of Des Moines. That is likely to be extrapolated across the metro. And so it is a technical document. And so through this membership, the MPO could remove a lot of the technical barriers, especially for cities that don't have enough city staff to prepare these documents. We would provide this data to the cities. It would not be prescriptive, it would be informative, just like our trail conditions, pavement conditions, and safety data, et cetera. And then at the MPO level, we could incorporate this into our short and long-term planning, as well as create that cohesiveness of regional data similar to other data analysis that we do. Again, part of the package would be also connecting the region with custom resources and trainings as we find commonalities between needs and things like that. And then there is savings of up to $15,000 annually on individual fees if communities decided to join. Another thing that just came up with the infrastructure bill that just passed is that this would position the region and the MPO well to apply for some of these infrastructure funding dollars. Within the new program, there is a carbon reduction program that could be affected. There's resilient transportation pieces, and of course, EV charging, things like that. So this would be a good way to take our baseline metrics and then move ourselves forward through funding opportunities that come in the future. So with that, MPO staff does recommend approval, and I'd be happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Allison, thank you. Any questions for Allison? A lot of good information there. It is a voting item, item number 9.
Motion, Reba.
Second by Andover.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 10 is report and vote on the renewal of the Polk County Watershed Management MOU. Allison.
Yeah, that'll be me again. So I just wanted to bring that, we brought this to you last month. We did want to ask for your approval on this, signing this draft. The draft is still with the county's council at this point. They have a little bit of a backlog going on, as many of us do. But just a reminder, some of the changes, the MPO duties really stay the same, helping with the WMAs, mapping support, plan and policy development, and then outreach and communication like the RAIN campaign. And then again, we did revise language to create a perpetual agreement. And we've moved towards that with the WMAs as well. So usually every 3 years, we sign an agreement and we're moving kind of towards those more perpetual things, as this has been a strong partnership. So it would be $10,000 to the MPO annually, and we did define in the new MOU that that would be paid in April and October of each year. And it also does allow either entity to withdraw in March of each year. So then that can align better with our work program and some of the budgeting things that we do at the MPO. Staff does recommend approval of the draft MOU. And in December, if there are any major changes or any changes really at all, I'll come back and update you on those as we receive word from the county's council as well. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Excellent. Any questions for Allison?
Move approval.
Second, Walters.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 11 is report vote on the fiscal year 2022-2025 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Andrew.
Yes, thank you. So the proposed amendment is to add a new project into the TIP to federal fiscal year 2022, the Great Western Trail Renovation Phase 1 project from Warren County Conservation Board. This project received approximately $637,000 in rec trail grant funding. It is supplemental funding that came from COVID relief dollars, which is why this is being done outside of our typical TIP amendment process. There are 2 sections of the trail that are being targeted with this funding. One is south of Cumming and one is near Martinsdale. Staff recommends approval of the proposed amendment. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions for Andrew?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 12 is report on the MPO representative selection process from Dylan.
Thank you. As we get to the end of the calendar year and we just got through elections, it's going to be time soon for our member communities to appoint their representatives to the board for the next calendar year. And since we updated our bylaws a couple of years ago, this is still kind of a work in progress. It's different from what a lot of people are used to. So we thought it'd be useful to walk through how this process works. And we'll be sending this out, assuming that everybody agrees with this. We'll be sending out notices to the communities to have them start this process here in the next week or so. So there's three key pieces to this. The one is the appointment of each community's policy and technical representatives, which is up to that jurisdiction. There's the appointment or the nomination of executive committee members, which depends on the size of the community, and then the election of officers. So if you go to the next slide, we'll kind of walk through this here and talk about the differences between the 2 different sizes of communities. So those communities that are under 50,000, they belong to one of the 3 sub areas, which are shown there on the right. And so what we typically have done is we ask each community to do their policy and technical reps as normal. And then the executive committee process, there's supposed to be a selection committee, and all this is outlined in the bylaws. Selection committee of the mayors or the county supervisor from that jurisdiction, from that sub area, who meet and select 2 representatives to represent that sub area. That process isn't very well defined in the bylaws. It just says that they have to get together and meet. So we're going to try to put a little more structure to it to help those communities along, because what we've ran into the last few years is we're coming up on the time where we need to have those nominees, and we've got to contact the jurisdictions, and there's not a great, there's just not a lot of a paper trail, for lack of a better word, of what that process was to appoint those representatives. So what we're going to change to do is send resolutions and send a form to each community that asks for their policy and technical reps as usual, but also asks for their executive committee nominee, because the bylaws say that that nominee has to be approved by that city council or that county board of supervisors. Then we will provide those nominees to that selection committee, and we as staff will set a time for that group to get together to meet, so that we've carved that out on the schedule. We have a time they can get together. We'll ensure that as many of them can be there as possible, and then we'll provide whatever the results of that are to the nominating committee so they can consider them when officers are selected. Are there any questions about that process? Because this process is a little more cumbersome than those for the over 50,000 that I'll talk about next.
Any questions for Dylan?
So if not, if we go to the next slide, then the process for the over 50,000 as well as Polk County is pretty straightforward, because they all get to appoint their executive committee reps as well. So we'll just ask for them to appoint their policy, tech, and exec reps all at the same time. And then once that's all done, Joe, you'll have to appoint a nominating committee at some point in February or prior to February, because at the February executive committee meeting is where you will all receive the slate of officers, and then the policy committee will vote on that at the February meeting, and then the new officers will take effect in March. So assuming everyone's on board with this process, and again, this process is pretty much outlined in the bylaws, we will reach out to the communities here in the next week or so to start this process and to have them give us their nominees or the representatives by the end of December. And then after that, we'll go on to the selection of the executive committee and so on through the process. But if there's any questions about any of this, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll proceed forward.
Any questions for Dylan? So I would love to have a commitment out of the executive committee of who wants to be on the nominating committee for this. If someone can shoot me an email if you're interested in doing that. Otherwise, I'll just have to, I guess, appoint. Or is it 3 that I have to appoint? Is that what it is?
Yes, 3 representatives.
If you're interested, shoot me an email, shoot me a text, and I'd be happy to put you on. Any questions or comments for Dylan or for myself? All right, I hear none. We'll move on to item 13. Thank you, Dylan. As a report on the fiscal year 2022 first quarter budget report from Dylan.
Yes, as we like to do at the end of the quarter, we bring you where we're at budget-wise throughout the year. So if you go to the next slide, and in your packet on page 18 is that table that shows you all of the various budget entries and kind of what we budgeted, what we've done in the first quarter, how much is remaining, and so forth. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that on the screen here too. Nothing really stands out as far as being an anomaly. We're pretty much in line with where we expect to be throughout the year. Not shown on the slide here in the PowerPoint, but at the bottom on page 18, you also see where we're at with the transload grant, the build grant, and so forth. And Zach will talk a little bit more about that during the transload update, I'm sure. But again, we're pretty much in line with everything there. So if there's any questions about this, happy to take them. Otherwise, this is just for your information.
Thanks, Dylan. Any questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to item 14 is a report on anticipated fiscal year 2023 NPO assessments.
All right, this is me again. So with the release of the decennial census information last month, we can now have a pretty good guess of what our assessments will be, assuming that the board doesn't want to change anything with the way we've been doing things. For the last 10 years or so, we've been having our assessments set at $1 per capita. And that population is based on either the decennial census or something we changed to in the last couple of years using the recent census estimate. Since there's a decennial census that just came out, that's a pretty solid number to use this time around. On the slide as well as in your packet, you can see what those numbers look like. And we're putting this out there, or explaining this to you today, because we start to get calls around this time of year from our communities asking what their assessments are likely to be, because they're working through their budget process. So what we want to do is just be proactive and let the communities know that this is what your assessments are likely to be. It won't be voted on by this committee or by the policy committee until probably March or so, but this is what we anticipate them being, barring any changes. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see what those figures look like as compared to last year. A few things I'll point out here is, one, the counties are, their population that they're used for assessments is the portion within the MPO area that is not a part of another city. So it's the unincorporated areas only within the MPO boundaries. That's not a number the census just gives us. We have to manually calculate that, and we still have to do that. So this table does not include that figure for the counties, but it's a relatively small amount compared to everything else. Just looking at the cities, our amount increased by about $9,800 from last year. If there's any questions about this, happy to take them. Otherwise, again, this is just for your information, and we've reached out to the cities already to let them know this is approximately what they can expect moving forward for their budgeting purposes.
Thanks, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan? Thank you. Item 15 is a report on the Surface Transportation Block Grant STBG program schedule. Zach, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. Just wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at with the federal fiscal year 2026 STBG program process and schedule. We're currently working on updating the applications for both STBG and TAP, and those applications will be posted on our website by December 3rd. And then we're going to have the applications due back to the MPO by January 7th. We're still working on scheduling when the presentations will be, but they'll probably be sometime in late February or early March. And then we'll have the funding subcommittee follow up on that probably in late March to develop their recommendation for funding. So again, just wanted to let you know that we're in the process of getting that all set up, and we'll have more information on that in the coming meetings.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions for Zach? All right, item 16 is a report on mobilizing tomorrow performance measure dashboard from Z.
Joe, I'll give a quick intro on this and then turn it over to Z.
Okay.
Just as a reminder to everyone, we approved our update to Mobilizing Tomorrow back in November of 2019. So we're now kind of in the second year anniversary of that plan update. And if you recall, in the past, we kind of tended to do some static reports about every quarter or so, just updating the committee on where we're at as far as meeting the performance measures that we've outlined in the long range plan. We're switching that up a little bit. Z has developed some really neat online dashboards that track our performance measures. And so I'll turn it over to him to kind of share with you what he's developed.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, so I'll give a brief introduction of all the different performance measure dashboards. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Thanks. So this is just an example of a performance dashboard. Right now, we're looking at the system and freight reliability measure dashboard. So most of these dashboards will have a section with information about the performance measure. On the left, you'll see a column of text. And for some performance measures, there are also interactive maps as well. But for this measure, there are only numbers and graphs. There's an option for you to select the different years. There'll be color-coded indicators to see whether we have been achieving or not achieving a target. So green is good for yes, and red is it means we're not achieving something. We can also look at the targets for a 5-year and 2050 target cycle as well. And usually there will be some historic performance, either in the form of graphs or tables, and it'll have the different 5-year and 2050 targets as well. Next slide, please. So in order to look at these dashboards, they're readily available on the MPO's main website. You just need to go to the resources tab and then the performance measure sub tab underneath that to check it out. So if you have a moment, we would recommend you to check out the different performance measure dashboards.
Thank you, Z. Anybody have any questions for Z or Zach? Thank you. Appreciate your work. Item 17 is a report on the Purple Heart Highway update. Is that right? Yeah, Purple Heart Highway update from Todd.
Yep, thank you. Just wanted to give you a quick update. I had talked with Stu Anderson earlier late last month and a little earlier this month. They've met with several of the groups, ones in bold here. They have since met with Heartland Co-op, Iowa Farm Bureau, and Polk County Farm Bureau, and they're scheduling meetings with the others. I will be helping, our staff will be helping set up the meetings with the community members of the MPO. Stu asked us to help with that in his last email to me. So the conversations regarding this continue. Had some conversations with Tim Marshall, who's the administrator at Federal Highway in Ames, head of the Ames Federal Highway Office. And we had an overall conversation with him about just the MPO in general and projects going on in the MPO. It was a nice conversation with him and a couple of his staff members and some of the staff at the MPO. But we did talk about Purple Heart Highway, and he was supportive of the idea of the conversion. So that was good to hear that he doesn't see huge roadblocks from his side of the things. He understands the weight issue is, and kind of the overriding issue. He agrees that there's probably the best way to handle that is through getting language in legislation, ultimately. So we'll keep working on that with them and keep on tabs with the meetings that the DOT is working on regarding their stakeholder meetings. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd? All right, here none. We'll move on to item 18 is a report on the Economic Development District update from Gunner.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to keep you up to date on the process that we've been going through over the past year to develop an economic development district. We're through phase 1. There is plenty of support for this. We are through phase 2 and starting to look into phase 3, which is the designation process, and getting to the point where we can anticipate being fully operational. A few things that are new here to draw your attention to is that the designation application the package has been approved by the regional office and is starting to go through the subsequent rounds of review on up through headquarters. This will need to be approved by a deputy administrator before it's all done. So we have some ways to go, but early signs are good that we have submitted everything that we need. That includes an updated version of the SEDS, which has been finalized and approved by the regional office. I'll also point out that we continue to prepare to open the membership enrollment for the eligible jurisdictions to join the new group. We all are also developing a framework for the staffing plan and contract between the organizations. And again, reiterate that we anticipate that this could start in earnest as early as April of 2022. A couple of points that I mentioned that I'll go into a little more deeply is the updated comprehensive economic development strategy. We had about 20 pages to that document. Primary changes were to add a resiliency section. Doesn't really change what we had proposed to do in the plan, just was more specific, speaking in resiliency language. The other thing that we did was add an action implementation table. Again, this added some more specificity to how the implementation of the plan will occur. The other thing that we'll touch on briefly is we've talked about the MPO being contracted by MIPA to staff MIPA. The way it's going to work after consulting with the EDA staff is MIPA will employ a senior planner, and then MIPA will contract with the MPO for all the back office and admin support, such as accounting, auditing, staff supervision, office space, payroll, etc. So just wanted to mention that to you early. So eventually we'll be coming to you with a contract. So just want to keep you up to date as that starts to develop. And then lastly, I've mentioned this before, but we continue to work with a handful of jurisdictions on potential applications for money through the American Rescue Plan. That's it for me for today, unless there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Gunner. Any questions for Gunner? You're off the hook. Item 19 is a report on the transload facility update. Zach.
Yes, just wanted to give you our monthly update on where we're at with the transload facility development. There on the first slide, you'll see a list of all the things that they're currently kind of working on and wrapping up. I will say kind of the key things are that right now they're laying all the ballast on the track, and I'll show an image of that to you here in a second. They've completed all the office walls, and most of the electrical work on the interior of the building is also completed. Another big thing that they've completed last week was to assemble the Iowa Interstate Rail Switch, and it was installed at the end of the week. So they're now connected into all of the railroads, which is exciting. And then they're also grouting the precast walls as well. And once they have all the panels grouted, they'll be able to turn the heat on, which is good timing since we're starting to get into the cold weather. I'm sure all the workers are going to appreciate having those wall panels grouted. So just a few images to share with you, like we do. As I mentioned, this is the image of them laying the ballast down. They bring it in these rail cars and then dump it out directly onto the track like that. They've got a lot. I think the total, they've got like 120 cars that they're bringing in with the ballast. They're working, last week they were working on cars 21 through 40. So they got a little ways to go, but they're getting that ballast work done. This is an image of the finished completed truck apron outside the warehouse building. You can also see that they have all the windows installed, or most all the windows and doors installed in the front there. Another exciting thing about that is that once they get those all installed, they're gonna be able to securely lock up the facility, and they don't have to worry about anybody getting into it during the final construction phases of the project. This just shows you a pulled back image of the full site with the stormwater facilities there in front, and you can see the warehouse and truck apron there in the back, and then the track on the far side there. This is a recent image of what the inside of the warehouse looks like. So you can see they have all the concrete flooring poured, and looks like they're, in this image, looks like they're working on getting those windows installed. So pretty cool looking warehouse they have going there. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about the where we're at kind of with the reimbursements as far as the build grant goes. We submitted the last reimbursement request back on October 20th for $1.4 million roughly. To date, they've requested a little over $7 million in the build grant funds. So we have about $4.1 million remaining to be reimbursed. We're expecting that we should get the next reimbursement request for them, which will be the 5th request they've made, probably sometime this week or early next week. And I think that's all I have other than the schedule that we've had on for the past couple months. Nothing's really changed on this. They're still on schedule to have that formal certificate of occupancy by the spring of 2022. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions, comments? All right. Item 20 is a legislative update report from Dylan.
Thank you. As you've probably all seen, the House late last week passed the reauthorization bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as it's called. This has some pretty significant increases to funding for transportation, and there's also broadband and some other things in there. There's an article in the paper, as Joe, or I think Joe mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting, that mentions some of the funding that might be coming to Iowa. We have yet to see anything of what we specifically will be getting for the MPO or in this metro area, but that should be coming in within the month, I assume. But there are pretty significant increases. As I mentioned, the USDOT will receive about $275 billion more in spending authority over what it's currently getting. In terms of programs that the MPO receives, such as Surface Transportation Block Grant, TAP, Just our metropolitan planning funds, those are all increasing by a pretty, maybe 33% or so. For each one of those, TAP is increasing by almost 75%. So we should see some pretty good increases in funding. Now those increases are nationwide. Again, we still need to see how it trickles down to our MPO up to know exactly how much we're going to be receiving, but it should be an increase over what we've been getting. There's still no deal yet on the $1.7 trillion reconciliation bill. As you know, these were initially supposed to be passed together, but through some political maneuvering, they were able to pass the infrastructure bill, and then they'll take up the reconciliation bill, probably try again next week when everyone's back. So there could be some additional transportation or infrastructure funding through that bill as well. That's what I have for you here. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take it.
Dylan, thank you. Any questions, comments? All right. Item 21 is a report on upcoming events from Gunner.
So again, just a few things to make you aware of. First is a one-day interactive workshop on mitigation and disaster recovery, put on by APA Iowa. That's coming up here Saturday. So we'll send links around for everybody to have these, but just want to give that heads up. This one's kind of neat. Iowa's Living Roadways celebration. It's a 25-year-old program now. They're celebrating that benchmark with an event featuring James and Deborah Fowles, the authors of Our Town. That's coming up in Ames on November 19th. Also, there's a local advocacy summit being put on by AARP Iowa. Also at noon. This is an online event by Zoom, and it's really about people that you speak to a lot and teaching them to do it in an effective manner. And that's it for me for events. Let's see if you have any questions.
Any questions for Gunner? I hear none. Item 22 is our last voting item. It's the approval of the MPO Policy Committee agenda. Is there any questions or comments?
I'll move it, Gare.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item 23 is other non-action items of interest to the committee. Todd, I think you have a couple, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I mentioned one, Tim Marshall, the administrator for FHWA Iowa out of the Ames, that we had a great meeting with him, and it was a good conversation about all things MPO really. And then we did, as I mentioned, talk a little bit in particular about Purple Heart Highway and a few other projects. So he'll potentially attend a meeting here in the near future and introduce himself to the board. So we'll work to get that scheduled. The other one I wanted to mention is Aspen Flans has joined the MPO. As you remember, Shiroshi left the MPO a few weeks ago. Aspen has been working at the DOT for the past year or so. She was an intern at the MPO a couple of years ago. And when we had the position opened up, she applied. Want to welcome Aspen. You'll be seeing her name. So just wanted to let you know she has joined the staff. Thanks.
Aspen.
Thank you very much. Happy to be back.
Absolutely. Anybody else have anything? All right, our next meeting date is December 8th at 11:30. We do have a policy meeting, correct? Next Thursday?
Yes.
All right, our next executive meeting is December 8th at 11:30, and this meeting's adjourned.